The initial NFL Week 8 injury report is out, and it is a doozy. My name is Joe Dolan, and this is the Fantasy Points Morning Lineup for Thursday, October 26th, 2023. Eventually, I will stop reminding you that the Fantasy Points Data Suite is 75% off for the 2023 NFL season, but today is not that day. All the stats in this program come from it, and you can get them as well right in front of your fingertips. It is the most powerful data research tool you will have in fantasy football, I guarantee you. And also, you can use code GARIFIC25 to get a Fantasy Points content package, which is already 50% off, but you can get an additional 25% off with that code GARIFIC25. So make sure you do that. Let's start with Thursday Night Football. The Buccaneers have two players listed as questionable. Quarterback Baker Mayfield has a knee injury, and wide receiver Chris Godwin has a neck injury. But both practiced in full on Wednesday, so I would expect both to go against the Bills. Now, they also activated running back Chase Edmonds off of injured reserve. He has been ineffective as a runner basically in his entire career, but the concern for me is he gets passing down work, and that could really cap the upside for Rachaad White. Nonetheless, the Bills have given up the most yards after contact on the ground in the NFL this year by far, and Rachaad White, if he's been your RB2, I would still kind of fire him up, inefficient though he's been. Now, obviously, on the other side, Bills tight end Dawson Knox has had wrist surgery, and he will miss this game. He's not yet on IR, but he will miss this game. Dalton Kincaid led the Bills in receiving last week against the Patriots and is a mid to high tight end 1 on Thursday night. Next up, the Dolphins, kind of surprisingly, have a couple of big injuries. And one of their wide receivers is affected, but maybe not the one you think. Even though Jalen Waddle left Sunday night's game against the Eagles with back injury, it was Tyreek Hill who did not practice on Wednesday with a hip injury. I'm not going to read too much into these quotes, but nobody came out and said, oh, this is just a rest thing, blah, blah, blah. Here's Tua Tagovailoa and what he said. If we couldn't have Tyreek, that would be tough. But the show goes on. You got to continue to play, and somewhere down the line, we're going to get Tyreek back. Somewhere down the line. And, it has to be one of those things where you never lift your foot off the gas and you don't lose that rhythm as a team or as a unit. Okay? There was some word salad in there, some really quarterback rah-rah Magoo stuff there, but the somewhere down the line thing, I don't like that. I really don't like that. I really hope he practices on Thursday and assuages my concern here. And the Dolphins have another injury on offense. Running back Raheem Mostert did not practice on Wednesday with an ankle injury. Now, obviously, Mostert has an extensive injury history, didn't have a great game against the Eagles. They could just be resting him. They could be resting Tyreek as well. But both of those guys being out of practice on Wednesday, that's a concern for me. Not very happy with that. Please assuage my concerns on Thursday, Mike McDaniel. Get them both out there. At quarterback, there's a lot of news. We already know Deshaun Watson has been ruled out for Week 8 per Coach Kevin Stefanski. PJ Walker will start yet again for the Browns. But that's bad news for the Browns. Walker has not been very good. And honestly, they've kind of lucked into 2 straight wins. They probably should go make a move for a quarterback if Deshaun Watson is going to miss more time. And it certainly doesn't sound very good for Deshaun Watson. Per ESPN's Adam Schefter, the injury that Watson has is something that would cost a baseball pitcher 4 to 6 weeks. Obviously, throwing a football is not as violent as throwing a baseball, but there's also contact in football. There's not contact in baseball. So this is not a great sign for Deshaun Watson. And honestly, the Browns' investment with every passing day gets worse and worse. Since the start of the 2021 season, 41 quarterbacks have thrown more touchdowns than Deshaun Watson has thrown. And the number of those quarterbacks to get paid more than Deshaun, decidedly less. 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy was surprisingly added to the concussion protocol after developing symptoms on his flight home from Minnesota. And honestly, this is a concern because it's a short week. Purdy played on Monday night, and now he's added to the concussion protocol on Wednesday, which gives him less time to clear. This is obviously a big concern right now. What I would be interested in, though, is if Sam Darnold has to play on Sunday, we could really see if this is a foolproof system as they look to take on the Bengals. The Titans quarterback Ryan Tannehill is not expected to play, and I wonder if the Titans fire sale is officially going to happen. They already traded safety Kevin Byard to the Eagles this week, and now Tannehill's going to miss this week, almost certainly. Now, per NFL Network's Ian Rappaport, Rookie Will Levis is expected to start and be the number one quarterback for the Titans, which is understandable, given Malik Willis looked completely lost every time he's played in the NFL, including after Tannehill got hurt before the bye. But per Coach Mike Vrabel, Levis and Malik Willis could both play and rotate every series or two. Yikes. This is obviously not an ideal situation. And Derrick Henry, just like in years past, but this year especially, has been terrible for fantasy as an underdog. They're 3-point underdogs this week against Atlanta in a tough matchup, and you wonder if Derrick Henry is going to get bottled up in what could be his final game as a Tennessee Titan. Now, look, the Titans are probably going to make the right decision and recoup a lot of draft capital. That includes Derrick Henry, maybe DeAndre Hopkins, somebody that they could look to move. If Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins were moved, what's your favorite potential fantasy football landing spot for either of those guys? I'll tell you what mine is for Derrick Henry. It's the Baltimore Ravens. But if you've got other answers for Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins, pop them in the comments. I'd like to hear from you. Giants quarterback Daniel Jones is not yet cleared for contact, per Coach Brian Daboll. Now, the good news for either Tyrod Taylor or Danny Dimes is that it appears left tackle Andrew Thomas and center John Michael Schmitz could have a chance to play this week after returning to practice in a limited fashion on Wednesday. The bad news is, if those guys come back, and for the quarterbacks, it'll be against that nasty Jets defense if they do go. The Giants have our worst pass grade of the week at Fantasy Points Data, and if I were Coach Brian Daboll, this would not be the defense against which I'd bring back Jones, even if he's cleared for contact. He's somebody who looks shell-shocked. Try to wait for a little bit of an easier matchup. Maybe let Thomas get his feet under him a little bit more. Tyrod's been moving the offense just fine. I'd go with Tyrod this week. And if you need a quarterback for fantasy football, this is your last chance to go get Kyler Murray. I talked about it last week, but he practiced in full on Wednesday as the Cardinals continue to ramp him up. He might not start this week, but his time is coming. And Josh Dobbs, well, as good as he has played at times, as good as he's looked at times, the last few weeks, we've seen him splatter against his ceiling. He is a backup quarterback, a solid one, an athletic one, but a backup quarterback nonetheless. Kyler will take this job very shortly. At running back, well, Bijan Robinson practiced in full on Wednesday. He's fine. Arthur Smith, obviously, he did it's simple why we gave him a carry at the end of the game in the 2-minute drill. Whatever, I don't care about it. They screwed us. They screwed everybody. I saw some of the books were either refunding or giving out free bets. And the NFL is rightfully looking into the Bijan Robinson status in why he wasn't listed on the injury report. Whatever, he's going to play this week, and he'll probably get 12 touches while they give Cordero Patterson 18. But Bijan Robinson's got to be in your lineup this week against the Titans. The Packers' Rwn Johnson just returned last week from his hamstring injury. Well, he did not practice on Wednesday. And here's what Coach Matt LaFleur had to say. Quote, "He's a little bit sore, which is to be expected. Hopefully, we can ramp him up and get him more snaps out there." Now, it sounds like they're taking it easy with a veteran player here, but the DNP on Wednesday is at least a mild concern. They have not had any explosiveness in their run game whatsoever, and I wouldn't expect it without Jones if Jones can't play a full snap share against the Vikings this weekend. The Colts' Zack Moss didn't practice on Wednesday with elbow and heel injuries. Jonathan Taylor has already started to take this backfield over. Now, while they split the snaps 50-50, Taylor had the much higher XFP, expected fantasy points, this past weekend, and got all of their opportunities in the red zone. None for Moss. So Jonathan Taylor is back on the RB1 radar officially, especially if Moss can't play this week. The Panthers' Miles Sanders off a bye practiced in full on Wednesday as he's coming off a shoulder injury, but he really wasn't effective before the bye. Chuba Hubbard kind of was, and Coach Frank Reich said this could be a committee approach while they ride the hot hand going forward. Both Hubbard and Sanders are mid to low flexes until this thing gets sorted out, if it gets sorted out, and it might not. The Bears' Rwn Johnson returned to a full practice on Wednesday, has not officially cleared concussion protocol yet, but earlier in the week, Coach Matt Eberflus said he only had one more step to go, and it looks like he's really close to clearing. He should be rostered in every format, but the question now is, with Tyson Bagent starting at quarterback on Sunday Night Football against the Chargers, are the Bears going to go away from Deontay Foreman? Foreman's on his third team in 3 years. He was a healthy scratch at the beginning of this year. And there's very clearly something coaches don't love about Deontay Foreman, because he ends up as a healthy scratch, or he ends up cut, or he ends up on the free agent market. And then he gets an opportunity And he produces. That's kind of what he does. Even if Rwn Johnson's back this week, D'Onta Foreman is my preferred Bear running back, and I'd probably give Rwn Johnson 1 week to see what his role is before I can advise putting him in a lineup. The Browns won't have Jerome Ford with a high ankle sprain most likely this weekend, but even though Kareem Hunt with his thigh injury didn't practice on Wednesday, per Coach Kevin Stefanski, he will play on Sunday. Now, it is notable that after Ford left last week's game against the Colts, Pierre Strong actually outsnapped. He doubled up Kareem Hunt in snaps, but Hunt got the red zone and goal line work. That is the juicier role, which is why I prefer Hunt to Strong, even though you can use Strong in a lineup if you're desperate. Let's get a couple of wide receiver notes, especially with guys who are expected to come back this week. DK Metcalf. He's expected to play this week after missing last week with rib and hip injuries. He was just sore. He needed to get that rest, but he will play this week for the Seahawks in their wonderful throwback uniforms, I might add. Tank Dell is expected to return and clear concussion protocol this week for the Texans off of their bye. Treylon Burks for the Titans. He's expected to return from a knee injury after their bye, and eventually he might be their number one again if they decide to trade DeAndre Hopkins. Meanwhile, a couple things that we have to watch here. The Chargers' Josh Palmer did not practice on Wednesday with a knee injury. That is a surprise, and hopefully they're just taking it easy because he's been a really good fantasy asset. While their number one draft pick, Quentin Johnston's essentially been running wind sprints, Palmer, very quietly, per our Chris Wecht at Fantasy Points data, is 13th in yards per route run since the Mike Williams injury. Keenan Allen is 40th in the same category. Palmer's been an every week wide receiver 3, and they really need him this week, but let's see if he is able to practice. Now, somewhat surprisingly, the Packers' Christian Watson got in a full practice on Wednesday after his Sunday scare with a knee injury on a knee that's already been surgically repaired. And as we've seen this year, the Packers are exceptionally conservative with practicing through injuries, so this really must have been a nothing burger for Watson. And he also drew shadow coverage from Patrick Surtain last week. Our guy Scott Barrett is insisting that a Watson breakout is coming. Maybe it'll start this week against the Packers. The Chargers, there's an injury at tight end as well for them. Gerald Everett did not practice on Wednesday with a hip injury. He's not really a fantasy option at this point. The Vikings, TJ Hawkinson, did not practice with a foot injury. Now, that's not shocking after he left Monday's game about 45 times with the same injury, but he played through the injury, kept returning. Maybe it stiffened up on him, but for now, I'd expect Hawkinson to play this weekend and continue to produce. And if you're looking for another tight end off the waiver wire, maybe he's still out there. But on Wednesday morning, the Cardinals put Zach Ertz on injured reserve. Trey McBride, kind of like Dalton Kincaid of the Bills, is now a usable tight end 1. I'm out of breath after all those injuries. Thanks for joining me for the Fantasy Points morning lineup. Remember to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, hit that like button. You'll be glad you did. And make sure you subscribe to fantasypoints.com with code GURIFIC25. Come say hi to me in our subscriber Discord. I'll talk to you on Saturday, everybody, with our final injury reports.